let's take a look at the Pro Tools Proficiency test. You can navigate here through modules to the Pro Tools Proficiency test. So as you can see here, there's a series of tasks. They're going to assess your ability in Pro Tools. You'll have 10 minutes to complete the following 8 tasks. The first one is to set up a new Pro Tools session in the correct format and in the correct place on the hard drive. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit Command-Shift-N to go into incognito mode apparently. So instead, let's make sure we're in Pro Tools and do Command-N to create a new session. You can also go up to File and Create New as well. Once you're here, you want to label it year, month, date. So I have 230920. My name, which is Doug B, and project name, in this case it'll be the PTPT. We'll want to go ahead and make sure it's WAV 24-bit 441. Also important, make sure it's the SSL IO. We'll need that. Normally we want to save it on Glyph A, but saving to the desktop is just fine for now. We're going to hit create. Great, now that we've created a new session, the next step says to import this guitar wave file. Let me go ahead and download it. When you're taking the test, it will appear on the desktop, but for right now, just make sure it's on the desktop here. I'll unzip it. When you take the test, it will appear on the desktop. So what we're going to do is navigate to Pro Tools and actually just drag the file into the tracks list. When we do that, you notice it says, should we import the original tempo from file? Yes, let's import it. This will actually set our session tempo to the default of 98 beats per minute. And look at here, we now have the guitar PTP track, and it's going directly out the stereo bus. Which is 15 and 16 on the SSL console. Now I'll direct your attention to the SSL console. Right now we're not seeing any signal on 15 and 16. So in order to see signal, we need to first go ahead. If you notice, it's looking for a DAW input, so that's good. If we press play in Pro Tools or hit the play button on the SSL, we should be able to see some level on 15 and 16. Great, so we're seeing it's playing. Let me go ahead and just loop this up for right now, just so that we can continue to hear it and see level. Notice we're seeing level on 15 and 16 because 15 and 16 is looking for the DAW output of the Apollo. As we scroll down here to the bottom of the track, we'll notice the faders are up as well as the master fader is up. So in that scenario, we should be able to hear signal. The only reason we can't is currently right now, if you look at the top of the track, these two tracks are not actually on the mix bus. So let's go ahead and select them. I can do that by selecting the first track, holding it, and selecting the second. So now anything that we set over here will be for both of those tracks. So I'll set them both to mix. And notice now, if we press play again, we're getting level on the track. And you also just heard some sound there, right? And we're starting to actually see level on our VUs and also out our monitor paths. It keeps stopping. I don't think we have loop record on up here. So let's make sure we go up and turn loop playback on so that when we loop this selection here, it'll just keep playing over and over again. That'll help us while we're trying to troubleshoot. So great, now we're getting levels on 15 and 16. They're on the mix bus. We're seeing level on the mix bus, so now all we have to do is go into our monitor section and make sure we're monitoring on the mix bus, and then just uncut the mains. Great, and we can adjust the volume here with the blue knob. When I'm done selecting these two tracks, I can unselect them, and now the master select section has gone dim. Notice also too, it matters that we have these faders on the channel up, as well as the master fader turned all the way up in order to monitor the output of Pro Tools. Great, now that we have the track in Pro Tools and we're able to hear it, Let's go ahead and loop it up a couple times. So I'm just going to select the whole thing with the grabber tool and hit Command D, that is, to loop it up. Great, now that it's looping, let's go back to the steps. The next one says to program a drum beat using MIDI. So very simply, let's just go back into Pro Tools. We're going to do Command-Shift-N to create a new track. We're going to create a stereo instrument track, and let's call it either drums or boom. I'll just call it drums with a Z. Great, so I've created that drum track. On the first insert on that drum track, I'm going to go to Instrument and go to Boom. So now, because I have the session tempo set to 98 when I imported it, I should be able to just play Boom, and it should play back in time with the rest of the session. If you recall, you can get it to just play back automatically by going to the pencil tool, clicking on C3, and just drawing a line from the start of the session through the loop. If we go back to the start, we should hear now some drums and guitar. Great. Now, the next step is a little bit more tricky because we have to now interface with a couple other parts of the SSL. In this next step, we're going to record 2 vocal takes into a playlist and comp them together. So what we need to do is go back into Pro Tools. We need to create one new mono track. So I'll hit Command-Shift-N to create a mono audio track, and we'll call this one Vox. I'm going to go ahead and just name it Vox.01. So right off the bat, when I go ahead and make a second take, it'll automatically name the second take Vox.02. This will be a lot easier when we get to the comping part of this step. So great, I've created that track. Notice because I'm using the SSL IO, it immediately goes to input 1, and sure enough, it's going out to the stereo bus. If I record and enable this track, notice I'm getting some level. I'll cut the mains here. You also heard I was hearing the output as well. So we'll switch over to the SSL view here real quickly. And if you notice now, in SSL view, of course, we're getting level because 15 and 16 are still on the mix bus, and we're getting levels out at our main mix out. And you can see right now we're not hearing anything because I cut the mains, but when we uncut them, we'll hear some level. One of the other things we have going on is because the signal flow, we have a microphone set up out in the studio going into API 1, and we've turned API 1 on by going mic 48 volts and turning the gain all the way up. If you notice then the Apollo shows us that we're getting level into Pro Tools, and that level is actually coming from the SSL channel 1. So you can see we're getting level on channel 1 on the SSL because the input is selected. So unlike on 15 and 16 where we have it listening to the DAW or back from Pro Tools, we have input 1 listening to the input of the API 1. API 1 through 4 are on tracks 1 through 4, then the Neve on 5 and 6, and then 7, 8 are the radial, and 9 and 10 are on the millennial. Right now we're not listening to any of those because they're all on DAW. But if you notice, track 1 is on input, so we're seeing level, and that level is going through the console to the Apollo. And then of course on input 1 on the Apollo, that's what we're then seeing at input 1 SSL on Vox.01. So now that we're getting some signal, let's go ahead and record a take. So I'm just going to go ahead, go back to the start, hit record or numeric 3, and I'll start recording. So great, I'm recording my first take here. Of course I have the mains muted because I just have the iPhone playing music back through. When you actually do this, you will have a vocal talent in your session or somebody singing or talking into the mic. So we'll hit stop, and when you do that, you're probably going to need to communicate to your artist. So if you're trying to communicate to the artist, you can talk to them via the artist button on the SSL that you can see here. You can press that to talk to them. Remember, the microphone for that talkback mic is all the way up at the top, and you can use this knob to adjust the volume. Make sure also in your artist section that you have the mix bus to press so they can hear what you're hearing. And if you need to adjust that volume or music level, mix bus level, you can do that here. So I'll probably just go and hit the artist button and say, hey, can we do another take? And the artist will probably say yeah, and we'll go ahead. I'll create a second take for them to go ahead and do a second take. So back in Pro Tools view here, I've created this take. So I'm going to go to the little disclosure triangle next to Vox.01 and go new. And notice how it automatically labeled it Vox.02. So I'll have a new take here, and I'll go ahead. Remember to push the artist button to let the artist know we're rolling again, and then we'll do a second take. So here I am recording that second take, having a great time recording the second take. When I'm done with those takes, I can turn off the record input. Remember to tell your artist they did a great job and send them on their way. Then what I'll do is I'm actually going to create a third take, and instead of having this one be called Vox.03, I'm just going to relabel this Vox Comp. So now that I have a take called Vox Comp, I'll switch from waveform view into playlist view. And now I can see the original Vox.01 as well as Vox.02. You may have to zoom in a little bit to see the entire name. So once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the selector tool, and I'll select the first part of Vox.01, remembering to hit the up arrow here. I'll go ahead and raise the Vox.01 up into the Vox Comp. It looks like I didn't record enough of Vox 2, so maybe I'll undo that and take the first part of Vox 2, use the up arrow to put it in the main Vox Comp take, and then I'll do the second half of Vox.01. Now that I can see I have a new Vox Comp take of both the Vox.02 and Vox.01, I'll collapse those takes back into waveform view. You can double click on it and hit Option Shift 3 to consolidate the take back into just one Vox Comp 01 take, or you can leave it as is. That takes us on to our next step. The next step asks us to insert one type of dynamic processing. So we can either use compression, which is dynamics, or EQ. Let's do compression because that's truly a dynamic processor. So let's go ahead and add some compression to the guitar track. So I'm just going to go to Insert A and go to Multi-Channel Dynamics. Maybe I'll just use the BF76, which is a pretty good compressor. You don't really have to do anything to it. You don't have to adjust the levels, but just to show that you can create an insert. Now the next step is a little bit more challenging because it asks us to set up a time-based effect. And you know with time-based effects, you don't often just put them right on the track as an insert. Instead, you'll need to set up a send and return. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to set up a send and return, first of all, you can do it the fast way or the slow way. Let's do it the slow way first, just so that you get the concept, because it's always a tricky one. So the first thing I'm going to do is let me send the guitar to the reverb. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to create Command Shift N. I'm going to create a new stereo aux input, and I'm going to call it verb. Great. So with the verb track set up, I'm going to go to Send A and go to Bus 1 and 2, and then I'm going to make the input of that verb track Bus 1 and 2. With that all set up, I can apply a little bit of reverb to that track. Let me just use Deverb. And when I press play now, I'll hear just the guitar. But if I click on this Bus 1 and 2 and raise that send level, you'll notice I'm also getting level here on the verb bus, and I'm getting level to it. By the way, there was a whole bunch of steps there, right? So if you want to streamline a little bit, let me go ahead and just delete this track and delete the send. Instead, what I can do is go to the send on the GTR track and go to new track. And right there, it'll ask me, I want to create a new stereo aux and samples, and I'll call the track verb. The cool part about this is it created a send called verb, and it already changed the input of that verb track to verb. So all I have to do now is put reverb on that aux send and just raise the send level that's already open here on guitar PT, and I get level in the verb. The next step asks us to add some automation. It says write appropriate automation. Probably just some volume or some send level automation to the track would be great. So you can see I could do volume here, and that would show my volume of the track. Or if I scroll down, there's something called send A. And if I go to the level of send A, that would be this level here, this send level here, that's going to the verb. So I could get out my pencil tool and do some crazy automation. And now if you notice, as I'm playing, this level is automated. So the final step says to go ahead and perform all the necessary steps to create a Redbook CD or a Redbook file in this case. So to do that, we want to select the entire track. Now, before we do that, before we go and bounce anything, we want to go ahead, Command-Shift-N, and create a new stereo master fader. Because on that master fader, we need to go ahead and put, by the way, notice how it defaults to bus 1 and 2, the output. So we're going to want to change that output to stereo bus. So as we do that stereo bus, on the last insert, we want to go ahead to multi-channel plugin dither and go to POW-R dither. We'll use noise shaping type 3, and because remember we'll be bouncing at the end down from 24-bit to 16-bit, we'll want to make sure that we have this set to 16-bit. Great, with that all set, then we can highlight what we want to bounce, and then you can just go up to File and Bounce Mix, and doing so, you'll want to make sure that you have a proper file names for it. So we'll call this PTPT. The file type will be WAV. We'll have it come out that stereo bus. Instead of the bit depth being 24, we want to quantize it down to 16-bit, which we can do because we put some dither on it. And then we just want to make sure it goes to the bounce file folder of the session we're currently in. In the PTPT, you don't actually have to bounce the session, so you can just hit cancel, and that's when the timer ends, and that's when you're done. The only other things you may want to do is go back ahead and normalize the board. So when normalizing the board, you're going to want to do a couple things. You're going to want to go to track 1 and make sure it's no longer on input. So I'll go to select and then go over to the main master settings section and hit set. Set's already pressed. So then I'll go up and flip the input back to DAW. It's good to keep all the inputs on DAW. It's just a good normal. Anything else that you may want to do is you may want to take 15 and 16 off the mix bus. You can do that by selecting both of those tracks and just turning the mix bus off. Notice it's not on mix anymore. Make sure your volume's all the way down, the main value or the main monitor's cut, and then make sure that your master fader as well as channel faders are turned all the way down. You may also notice too, these are still selected. We can deselect those. And if you notice, these pans were panned hard left and right, which is important, but you probably want to bring them back to center or detent to normalize the board.